everyone. Welcome to our latest episode of BurnCast. Of course, we have Liz Weibel, our PI coordinator and nurse practitioner, and Sorella, who is a pediatric nurse practitioner on our trauma and burn team. Me, you all know me. I'm with trauma and burn surgery. And today I'm excited to introduce Tanis Khalil, who is a co-director with Linda French at the Mid-Atlantic Burn Camp. So today we are going to learn all about Burn Camp. So I think the first question that I think we're all interested in and our staff would be interested in is, what is Burn Camp?
So the Mid-Atlantic Burn Camp is a medical specialty camp, primarily for children that have had burn injuries, treated at the regional burn centers. And just a tiny bit of history. We have our first camp in 1989, and at that time, Linda and I were working at the burn center at Johns Hopkins, and all the kids that came that year were kids that we had treated. But the very next year, in 1990, we took children from Children's Hospital in DC. So we've been taking kids from Children's for 34 years now. So very long relationship with Children's Hospital.
And did you just all the day look at Linda and be like, we should have a burn camp? Like what made you think we need to do this?
It's a much better story, actually. Hopefully you're familiar with the American Burn Association.
100%.
And Linda and I attended physical therapy school together, graduated in 1985, went to work at the burn center at Hopkins. And in 1988, she attended the ABA conference, and I had to stay back and treat the patients. This is the way it goes. So she came back very excited because she had seen a presentation from Denver Children's Hospital about their burn camp program. At that time, they had had a camp for 5 years. So they were basically doing a report on their first 5 years of camp. Linda was very excited, had talked to Marion Doctor, who was their clinical social worker, and asked Marion if she could come to their camp. And Marion invited her, and she took 2 young boys that we had treated at Hopkins, and that summer of '88 went out to Denver and attended their camp. When she came back, she was even more excited and trying to figure out how we could do this. And the two of us got together and said, hey, I think in the next year, we can put a program like this together. So as I said earlier, in the summer of 1989, we held our first camp at that time on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. And it was just kids from Hopkins. But then again, starting in our second year, we had reached out to Children's Hospital in DC, and we'd also reached out to the pediatric burn centers in Philadelphia and began taking children from both Washington and the Philadelphia area. And then over the next several years, pretty much grew it into a regional program.
How many kids did you have the first year?
The first year we had 17.
Okay. And how many did you have last year?
Well, last year we had 36.
Okay.
It's been an interesting trajectory on children. Our all-time high was actually 82.
Wow.
At camp.
That's a lot of kids at camp.
So camp steadily grew. Yes, it was. It was a lot of kids at camp. Camp steadily grew from 17 to 82 over about a 10 to 15 year period. And then it actually began to decline a little each year. And this has been a national trend. And the good news is there are fewer kids getting burned. And the severity of burns is less overall. Now, we all still see those big burns every now and then. But I can remember when I was, in the 80s at the burn center, it was just a constant occurrence of these children with very large injuries coming through the door. You just don't see that anymore, which is fantastic. So our numbers have declined along with everybody else's numbers across the country. And we see that as a positive trend, but there's still a need.
So 34 years of burn camp. And how long is burn camp? Is it a day, a week?
It's a 1 week camp. It's a 1 week sleepaway camp. Our current location, which we've been at for many years now, is near Harrisonburg, Virginia. We actually utilize 2 camps that are very close to each other. Camp Brethren Woods is the property where we actually live and run all of our own internal programs. And we can talk about programs a little later, get a better idea of what goes on at Burn Camp. And then right down the road, about 2 miles away, is a very large camp called Camp Horizons, where we were many years ago when we first arrived down in Virginia, which was in year 4. So you can see how 30 years ago. And they provide our horseback riding, all of our adventure programs, and all of our in and around transportation. And the problem we had is Camp Horizons just was too successful. They grew into this huge camp where they had 500 kids a week in their camp. And our camp was dwarfed, and we wanted to have the whole property to ourselves. And so their accountants basically said, this is not a sustainable model. So we moved just down the street 10, 12 years ago, and it's been really great. Camp Brethren Woods is basically a church camp, but we get the whole property. We get everything there. It's the right size for us. They love us. We love them. And we've had a very good relationship with them. And as I said, Camp Horizons, with all their resources, are still supporting us through all these years.
Oh, that's awesome. So can you tell me like what a day in the life of a camper is?
A day in the life of a camper. Okay. Well, a little bit about how we organize children, and that will help you to explain. So we organize by age groups. So our youngest kids are usually sometimes 7, but mostly 8 years old. So what we call group 1 would be our little kids, our 7 and 8 year old kids. And then we have numbered groups going up, and we put them together that way. That way we can also kind of customize the camp experience to the age of a child. 7-year-olds don't do what 17-year-olds do. It's just not the same. Pretty much our youngest kids through age 12 stay on the property for the entire week. Our kids 13 and up have, as I mentioned earlier, some adventure activities. So things like caving, rock climbing, canoeing on the Shenandoah River. We've done hang gliding. We've done all kinds of things with our older kids, and they love that. So a day in the life is up around 7 o'clock. I know that's a turnoff for many kids right there. Up around 7 o'clock, breakfast at 8 o'clock. Every meal is a sit-down family-style meal. Then we have 3 activity periods from 9 to noon. And during those periods, they rotate through a lot of different activities. And we have the typical camp activities. So we have an arts and crafts program. We have a science and nature program. We have a music program, which has been very, very popular. We have a cooking program. Again, been about 10 years of cooking program. We had no idea how popular that was going to be, but extremely popular. We have games. We have swimming. We have horseback riding. We do have a psychosocial program. So we have a full-time psychologist who is someone who works in the public school system with like 30 years of experience. So they're all kids all the time. And they come to camp and they do some very innovative psychosocial work with the kids while we're at camp. So they rotate through those 3 periods in the morning. Then we have an hour for lunch. Then we have what we call Z time, a little rest period after lunch, because young kids and old counselors all need to rest. That's very important. And then we have 3 more activity periods in the afternoon. Again, those same kind of rotations. Dinner, we always have a camp-wide evening program every evening, and that can vary from crazy Olympics, scavenger hunt. We have a movie night. We have a talent show. We have had a dance. So it just depends. We kind of customize it each year depending on what the theme's going to be and what kind of imaginative things our counselors come up with. Older kids are going to do that same kind of program, except they're going to have those days when they're off the property. So if you're in one of the older groups, you might leave in the morning, do a day-long canoe trip on the Shenandoah, camp out overnight, come back to camp the next day. Or you might go out and go rock climbing, come back, or you might go out and go caving and come back. And again, it just depends. And all the groups go horseback riding. So that's another off the property activity, because again, that's over at Camp Horizons. So they pick them up in a van, take them the 2 miles down the road. They have 2 hours of horseback riding, and they, bring them back. And every group does that twice during the week. So it's very busy. We find that busy campers don't get in trouble. So and that was a recommendation from the very first days. Not too much downtime, lots of activities, lots of engagement. And that helps with a lot of issues.
Does I totally lost my I lost my question. Liz or Ann, do you guys have a question while
I have a question.
Yeah.
Who makes up your counselors?
Our counselors. Okay.
I was just going to ask, how many do you have?
Yes.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask. Do your campers ever become counselors? So thank you for that.
I will cover all of that.
We all have counselor
I
questions.
was like, I had a question. I just couldn't remember it.
Our counselors are real adults. If you have kids and you send your kids to a day program or a summer camp, a lot of times you've got high school kids or some early college kids, and that's fine. I went to camp as a kid. I loved it. But of course, when we started our camp, because it has a therapeutic purpose, we started with the staff at the Burn Center. Now we have people from all walks of life who volunteer with us, but they're all real adults with real jobs, with a good story to tell kids about how to be successful, in life, because we also believe that, we should be, mentoring these kids as they come along. It's just not meeting their need relative to their burn, but we meet kids wherever we find them, whatever they need. We try to provide that for them. So when you look across our counselors, you will find firefighters, of course. You will find nurses and other medical people. You will find school teachers. We have attorneys, we have judges. We have people who work in the nuclear power industry. We get a lot of our counselors from reaching out to the hospitals directly and say, hey, do you have anyone? And we love that because your kids.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily, not like the old days when Linda and I treated every child and we knew them all. Those days are far behind us. And now we're really dependent upon the staff at the hospitals to not only refer kids, but then to give us a clue. What's going on with this child? What can we do to help them? So we really, really need that kind of information. And if you can be there personally, that's even better. Now, campers becoming counselors, absolutely, yes. We started very early with the idea that we wanted to grow future counselors, and we've been pretty successful at that. So this year, I will have we'll have about 40 counselors at camp, 40, 41, 42. And out of that, about 5 of them will be former campers who came to the program. Now, we will have some other adult burn survivors, because that's another group that we have that we've attracted to camp as well. So we have a couple of other adult burn survivors who are great mentors for the kids. And again, many of them were burned as children. And so they can talk about their injury from being, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, and everything, how it impacted their entire life, well on into adulthood. So we think that's valuable as well.
Are all of your counselors volunteers?
Yes, everybody's a volunteer. Linda and I are volunteers. Everybody's a volunteer. Another thing that was recommended to us very early on, it should be an all volunteer organization. If you absolutely, and the hard people to get, for instance, psychosocial support, a psychologist or a clinical social worker are difficult to get. Some camps pay those people to come to camp. Camp nurse. Now I'm overrun with camp nurses, so I don't have to worry about that.
I bet.
Got a great nursing staff. So I don't have any problem with nursing. Now we have a nurse out of Philadelphia who worked at Pediatric Burn Center for many years. She's now a manager in a different facility, but she's the camp nurse. Okay, so she deals with medication and boo-boos and whatever comes along. But we have many other nurses who are just counselors. But we can put them to work because, of course, kids come We've had children come with dressing changes that needed to be done.
That was going to be my question. Like, how does the
So,
burn
and-
have to be healed before they come to
No,
burn camp? or-
Absolutely not. We've actually had some very recent discharges from the hospital that end up coming to camp and some pretty big dressing changes, and we can handle that as long as we know
Wow.
in advance. I'm sure we could spin up if a kid showed up with a lot of dressings. We'd go, well, we can fix this. It just takes a minute. A few years ago, we had a young lady from Hopkins who was in hospital for 2 years. Out of hospital, her mother and I discussed her possibly coming to camp that summer. We decided it was not in her best interest, but the next summer she came. She was on a ventilator at night. So I had 2 critical care nurses that I assigned to her. It's like, you should be touching her at all times. Never take your hand off of it. And that went fine. And she moved on to get off the vent, to have her trach removed. She's also cochlear implant. She's also kidney transplant. She's also an amputee. So we can deal with very, very involved children, and we have the expertise to do that. And again, we have physical therapists, occupational therapists. We have all those things.
Literally the best the best place for a kid to go for
And
camp with like
and we
every
take-
resource.
Yeah, and I jokingly say, but it's literally true. There's an entire emergency room in my basement that goes to camp. And in Harrisonburg, we had a longtime volunteer from Anne Arundel County,
Mhm.
Maryland, who was a assistant chief. Eventually, we knew him from the time he was a firefighter, from the time he was lieutenant, captain, became battalion commander, on and on. Well, guess who's the fire chief of Harrisonburg, Virginia today? That gentleman. And he was recruited by them. He was recruited to Northern Virginia, was fire chief there for a while, finally went down. So they provide us with all of our emergency life support equipment when we arrive. Everything is trucked out to camp, set up in our medical area. And as we say, if you call from where we are, I don't think of it necessarily as isolated, but if you call an ambulance from there, it can take 40 minutes for them to arrive. So we had to make a decision very early on to be prepared for anything. Now,
Yeah.
lucky in 35 years, we've never had anything terrible happen, but we're ready.
That it's amazing that you have all of those volunteers, and that story about like having ICU nurses for the patient that needed a ventilator overnight. I've never heard of that in a burn camp. Was that the first one, or have you done that like at other times?
The first and only ventilator patient that we've had. That really became the issue the first year out. Her mother wanted her to go to camp. She wanted to go to camp. We were willing to provide whatever resources were necessary. Our big limitation, believe it or not, which doesn't sound like it's a big deal, was actually oxygen. So we were in the midst of figuring out how to get that delivered out to camp and maintain it through
Like
the whole week.
Right.
Set it all up, maintain it through the whole week, which I believe we could have done, but she was just having so many issues in so many areas. And we're like, maybe this is like a bridge too far,
Yeah.
even for us. And we're pretty good at this.
Yeah.
But like I said, the second year she came out and just had a wonderful, wonderful time. And has continued to come to camp and grown up. And now she's a teenager and she's doing very, very well. Just another resource story. So year before last, so 2021, the bus arrived at camp. All the kids got off. I'm there, just organizing. Okay, you go to this, you go to that group, whatever. Yeah. And our counselors, we all dress up for whatever the theme is when we meet the bus, and it's like a big party when the bus arrives. I'm going to get everybody excited about camp. But my physical therapy brain can never turn itself off. So she stepped off the bus with her prosthesis, and I said, make a mental note, something's not right. So it was not till breakfast the next morning, any group of children that has a mobility issue, they get a golf cart. So of course her group gets a golf cart. They drove up to the dining hall and she stepped off the golf cart and I went, nope, not good. So I went over and talked to her and I said, hey, is your leg bothering you? And she said, yeah, it's bothering me. I said, well, later today, Linda and I are going to take a look at it. And she's like, yeah, sure, that'd be good. Well, what we discovered, because I hadn't looked at it the year before when she came, is that she was so sick at the time they did the amputation, they did it bedside. And she had a really misshapen residual limb, which was never revised. And how she was fitting in a prosthesis at all, I have no idea. But she had all of these pressure areas. It was too wet. It's just all these problems. So we did what we could do at camp to deal with these issues. But I called her mother and explained to her about revision surgery and what she needed and what it would do for her. And if there's a best mom in the universe award, this is the best mom in the universe. So before the week was over for camp, she had already arranged for her child to go to Children's Hospital in Cincinnati and have her revision surgery done. And the doctor who was going to do the surgery called me at camp and said, well, I understand you're working with her. Well, kinda. I'm running a summer camp and she's attending, but I've got some expertise in this area. So we had a discussion about what I thought needed to be done. And he said, well, she's coming like in 2 days or 3 days. And so they drove to Cincinnati. She was evaluated. So she was out of camp on Saturday, in Cincinnati by Monday or Tuesday, had surgery on Thursday. He sent me pictures, intraoperative pictures of like pre and post. And then of course, after that, she had to be fitted with a new prosthesis. And it's just been phenomenal how much it's improved her mobility and has staved off future issues, because she eventually was going to have skin breakdown and possible infections and other things that were going to happen.
Wow.
So we intervene wherever we can to get a positive outcome, for kids. And we've done the same thing with prosthesis for other kids in the past, and refitting with wheelchairs. And yes, kids can come to camp, and if they're in a wheelchair, they can come to camp. If they have any kind of assistive device, they can come to camp. We'll accommodate all of that.
Is there a certain percentage that a child has to be burned for them to come to burn camp?
No, but a really, really important question, because I get this all the time. So if you were looking at criteria to come to burn camp, of course, the first thing would be they have some kind of burn injury. Now I'm going to caveat that, because we have kids who come to camp who are horse bites, dog bites, motorcycle accidents. Why? They all have the same issues. They all have scars. They all have psychosocial issues. They all wear pressure garments. Any child that falls in that category, burn camp's almost a misnomer. If we hadn't started a burn center, we might have named it something else, but it's probably 90% plus of the kids are actual burns. But that's something else to keep in mind. If you have kids with other trauma that you think would be appropriate, please refer them. We would be happy to have them.
Wow, that's I did not know that. Liz, Ann, did you guys know that?
No, and most people don't think
Yeah.
don't think about it, but I'm sure at your hospital, you treat kids with a lot of other trauma.
Oh,
Yeah, it
100%,
makes a lot
especially
of
the dog
sense.
bites.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, but just the burns alone. So the child has a burn injury that results in a scar of any kind that appears to be an issue for them or could be an issue for them. So it can actually be a pretty small total body surface area burn. I've had kids as small as 2% come to camp. Again, a story from the very beginning when we weren't as smart as we are now. Had a young man, 10 years old, came in. He raced motorbikes, dirt bikes. He had already injured himself in every conceivable way, and before we ever met him, and that was just his life. His dad raced, and he was going to be a racer. And if you know anything about motorbikes, you fall over a lot. So he had a muffler burn on his leg that was deep. He needed a graft. He got this little 1.5%, 2% graft on his leg. We saw him in outpatient clinic. He seemed fine. We didn't even talk about burn camp because I thought this kid had no issues to deal with. He gets about a 30-day follow-up. His mother comes in and says, he's really struggling. I'm like, struggling with what? And she says, well, he doesn't like the way his leg looks. He won't wear shorts anymore. Ah, I get it. I get it. So we talked about burn camp. He came to camp that next summer. He only came 1 year. He was the most outstanding camper that year. He was the bravest. He did everything. He was the team leader. He was, Mr. Positive. And that's all he needed. He just needed affirmation. He just needed to see there were other people. He just needed to see that, you could move on. And he did great. So a small injury can still be significant for that child, and camp would be good for them. And then, of course, any kid who's going to have ongoing issues, they are eventually going to need reconstructive surgery, or they've got visible scars, face, hands, things like that, where they're going to have to deal with all the psychosocial issues, perhaps for the rest of their life. We can really benefit those kids a lot.
How do kids get to your burn camp? Is it just through the hospital saying like, hey, we have a kid that might be interested in?
Right. We try to stay in touch with all of the referring hospitals, and if we don't hear from you, you'll hear from us. So we'll reach out to you every now and then to go, hey, haven't heard from you in a while. But yeah, we get a pretty steady stream of referrals out of Philly. Lehigh Medical Center, that's our furthest north location, and kids from Lehigh have been coming for quite a long time. And of course, Hopkins and Children's Hospital in DC. So yeah, pretty steady bit of referrals. Now, one of the challenges, well, there's actually several challenges. First, if you refer a child to us, we're going to reach out to that family. That doesn't mean that family is going to send their child to camp.
Right.
And we have many more kids in the database than ever come to camp. So last year, for instance, I said we had 36 kids at camp. We probably sent registration papers to 150 kids.
Wow.
So, and we have a pretty intense follow-up program. So there's always letters and emails that go out at the beginning of the year. So like January, early January, with save the date for our annual picnic, save the date for burn camp. And this goes to all ages. So even if they have a 6-month-old, they're going to get to save the date because it'll say, if your child's this age, they're eligible for this. Anybody can come to the picnic. We take everybody plus grandma and grandpa and all those guys can come. So we're going to do that. Then long about April, we're going to send registration papers to everybody that we think is eligible. We're going to wait a little while. And then we're going to send, again, emails and letter follow-up saying, hey, we haven't heard from you, but we want to just remind you, camp's coming. And then when we get, which will be happening probably in the next couple of weeks or so, we will start individually contacting families. We will call them if we have contact numbers for them. So we're very persistent in what we do. And again, this is because we found over the years that even that week before camp, you can find a family that always intended for their child to go to camp, but they just are struggling with so many things that they lost the papers, they never got around to reaching back out to us. So we keep reaching out to them because ultimately we want their child to be able to participate in the program. That's really all we care about.
Yeah. And I'm assuming burn camp is free for these children.
Everything that we offer families is completely free.
And how about transportation to burn camp? Do they just have to get there, or?
We provide transportation to camp from a number of locations. And again, we're very flexible on that with families. So we currently have a van, 15-passenger van, that is provided by the fire department that takes kids to camp from Children's National.
Okay.
So, and if we outgrow the van, we will get a bigger vehicle.
That's cool.
Or we'll get 2 vans, whatever it takes. We have a 55-passenger tour bus that starts in Lehigh and picks up kids in Lehigh and then comes down to Philadelphia. And there's a pickup location in Philadelphia for all the kids in that area. Then comes to Hopkins Bayview and picks up kids there, and then it goes to camp. And then we have a few kids that are just in these far-flung, like Central PA, They might have been flown into Hopkins, or you might get somebody who's flown into Children's from hundreds of miles away. If the family can't get to one of our locations, we work again, generally through the fire service, to get a couple of firefighters. We always have at least two adults, a couple of firefighters to pick that child up and get them, into the transportation system. Sometimes that means all the way to camp. Sometimes it means just to one of the pickup locations. And then of course they'll take them home as well. So we have a lot of flexibility on transportation.
And when is Burn Camp? Is it the
Burn
same
Camp-
week every year?
Relatively, yes. The calendar slides a day every year.
Yeah.
So every few years we have to slide with the calendar, or pretty soon Burn Camp would be in like May.
Right.
In the wrong direction. So Burn Camp is coming up the first week of August.
Okay.
So the actual, I'm gonna actually look at my phone, and so I can call out the dates to you. So I make sure that I give you the exact dates. There we go. Okay, so children would be July the 30th. Sunday, July 30th would be the day they go to camp. And Saturday, August 5th would be the day they come home from camp. Now, our counselors arrive at camp on the Friday before.
Okay.
We actually have what we call the advance party, because we have a huge truck that we load with all the supplies we're going to need for the week, the emergency room from my basement, all of those things. We leave on Thursday. And so the advance party, which is usually the truck and maybe about 20 volunteers, go down on Thursday and spend Thursday night at camp. And then on Friday at 10 a.m. in the morning, we start counselor training. So everybody else has to be there at 10. And we do training on Friday, Saturday, Sunday morning, and then about 1 o'clock on Sunday afternoon. The bus, vans, and all arrive, and camp is off and running.
And if we have staff members that are interested in volunteering, I guess for next year, like what type of process is that? Who do they contact? Because I feel like once people watch this, we may have some people that want to be involved and help.
And that, as I said, that would be great. We would love that. It's really very simple. All they need to do is to email us at burncamp@verizon.net, burncamp@verizon.net, and just say, my name is, I'm at Children's Hospital, I'm interested in being a counselor. And we will send them an application, which is pretty straightforward. It's like any other job. It's, name, rank, and serial number. It's going to ask for some references. It's going to ask for a profile, what do you do for a living? How long have you done it? Things like that. And when we get that back, we then will contact them for an interview. So everybody is interviewed, and we like doing in-person interviews, but we have done some Zoom interviews. We do have a far-flung group of counselors. I have people all the way from California. Many of them started in Baltimore, but eventually their jobs or whatever took them to the other side of the country. So they come in from all over. But we do an interview with them. If all that goes well, and with hospital people, it almost always goes very, very well. We bless them at the end of the interview, and basically they're in. We like to recruit new people in the fall, or toward the end of the year, because starting usually in February, we have monthly meetings with our volunteers, and again, they're in person and Zoom. We have one tomorrow night, as a matter of fact. We have next to the last meeting of the year. So we want to include them in that as early as possible, because one of the most valuable things about our counselors, it's great if they come to camp, but for everybody who comes to camp, I've got 2 people who've done camp before that don't do camp anymore for a variety of reasons, but we still need their brains. So they can help us develop themes. They can help us develop new programs. They can help us problem solve. So we like to get people involved very early so that we can get maximum benefit of their brain. And then if they happen to come to camp, that's great too.
Yeah. So you've been doing this for 34 years.
Yep, this will be 35th year this year.
What keeps you doing this? for as long as you have, because this is a lot of work.
It could
It's
be,
volunteer. It's hard. Working with kids is amazing, but it's also
Yeah.
exhausting. And so what keeps you coming back?
all of that is absolutely true. There are always those moments when you go, wow,
Yeah.
it's killing me. But it's just the devotion to the children. And for me personally, I mean, everybody's got their own story, but for me personally, I always felt very lucky as a child. I had a lot of adult mentors. I had a lot of people who helped me along the way, and I never forgot that. I was in Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, all the way to being assistant scoutmaster. I'm just one of those people that loves doing that. I then went into the big Boy Scouts, the Army, and continued that for a period of time. I always felt exceedingly lucky. My first job out of PT school was at the Burn Center at Johns Hopkins, and just learned so much. And again, wonderful people working there that inspired me. And then the people I met through the American Burn Association, people like Marion Doctor at Children's Hospital in Denver. They were the first. Well, there seems to be some discrepancy, but technically, they were the first week-long burn camp, medical specialty camp in the world. They invented it out there. Now, North Carolina's camp actually predates their camp by 1 year, but it was only a weekend program. It was very short. They came like on Friday, they went home on Sunday. Technically, it was a burn camp. So if you say who was the first, North Carolina was really the first. But the way we actually envision camp now was the very next year Denver did their program. And when we did our program in '89, we were the top 10 in the world. There were very few camps in 1989. There were a handful in the US, maybe one or two in Canada. There was one camp in Europe. There was no camps anywhere else in the world at that time. We've also been fortunate in the early years, people reached out to us. So we've helped mentor a lot of other camps into existence, including the first camp in the UK, a camp in the Netherlands, both camps that those people actually came and trained with us and to see how camp's done, just like we went and trained with Denver. So we continue to pass it on. We also were one of the founding camps of the International Association of Burn Camps. So there is a professional association for burn camps. So again, Marion Doctor and I, it's the old thing, on a napkin in Las Vegas, we sat down and said, we should have an organization. What would it look like? And we came back and I incorporated what would become the IABC. Also, if you're familiar with the International Association of Firefighters, International Burn Camp.
Yeah.
Linda and I created that for them and ran it for the first 15 years that they had that program. Wow. So we've had a lot of opportunities presented to us because we've done this program, and our kids have benefited from all those connections as well. So the things that we've done to help grow burn camps has also enriched our own camp and given more resources for our kids. For instance, they all go to the international camp the IAFF runs in DC. So that was another thing that they could participate in. We've done exchange programs with other camps. Oh, wow. We did an exchange program for a number of years with the camp in England.
Oh, that's fun.
Which was a lot of fun. Yeah, 9/11 screwed that up.
Yeah, I bet.
But we've started talking again about doing some international exchanges. So it's another thing that will benefit our children.
Wow. Before we wrap up for today, Anne and Liz, I feel like I've asked like most of the questions. Take your shot.
How is the camp funded?
See, a brilliant question. How's the camp funded? We have a lot of sources of funding. So we have two large funding organizations. We have the Burn Foundation in Philadelphia that has funded us from the second year that we existed to today. And we also have the Anne Arundel County Professional Firefighters Burn Fund that also is a big funder of ours. Those are our two major funding sources. We have some private foundations that provide us some grants. We have some many individuals who fund us. And I mean, that runs the gamut literally from the $20 donation to the $5,000 to $10,000 donation. So we've attracted a lot of support over the years, and we're very, very fortunate. I've never had to have a spaghetti dinner. I have never had
No bingo?
never had to do bingo. Yeah, exactly.
No,
No
man,
big deal.
bingo.
No
Yeah.
big sales.
So, right from the very beginning, we were very, very fortunate that these organizations took an interest in us and have stuck with us through, three and a half decades of time.
Wow.
What is the average number of camps that a camper usually attends? Like, do you see more of the patients who are, campers who come for 1 year and that's their 1 year? Do you see people who are there for 4 or 5 years in a
like
row?
how many times?
How many times do you, how many times do you see on
I say,
average, do you think?
fortunately, our kids come and stay with us.
Really?
There's a trend in the camping industry that's been going on for a while now of losing teenagers. So younger kids go to camp mainly because their parents make them. Now we're just talking about general camps now. And then once they get to that point where you can't make me anymore, they go, but I don't want to go to camp. I want to stay home and hang out with my friends and whatever. And that's been a problem for the camping industry. And we belong to the American Camps Association. So we attend some of their training. We get their newsletters, all those things. So we see these trends going on. We don't have that problem. Kids who come to us tend to come back every single year until they age out, unless something intervenes. And I mean, there are interventions. One intervention that happens with some teenagers is they get jobs. And some of them need to get a job because it helps to support their family. So they can't come to camp because they're working. So that's just a real world thing. Or a few of them sports. If they become, a fairly high level player in something that happens that during the summer, then they're in travel, whatever, name your thing, lacrosse, soccer. And see, I see that as a positive.
Yeah.
Camp is
definitely.
not an end in itself.
Yeah.
Camp is a vehicle to a better life. We love it when they move on in a positive way.
Yeah.
What really kills us is when we have that child that we know needs to come to camp and we just can't communicate with the family anymore. They've come a few years and then they move, we lose track of them. They don't answer any of our, any of the outreach that we have. And sometimes they end up aging out and we haven't seen them in several years. And we always wonder, well, what happened to that child? Because we don't always know. But kids who come tend to stay all the way through, and then they tend to want to come back and be counselors, which there are, again, in the early years, we tried to take anybody and bring them back to camp a few more years, and because we said they needed it. We learned this was a mistake, actually. There are some people cut out to be counselors and some people who are not. And the knots, there are other programs for them. We always refer everybody to the Phoenix Society, for ongoing peer support and all the wonderful programs that they run. They run programs for kids, but mainly for adults. We've done a young adults camp. We haven't done one in a few years since before COVID, but we probably will bring that back in the near future. So that's another thing that we provide. We have a winter camp. So we take our 15, 16, 17-year-olds up to the Poconos for a long weekend, and we work on educational plans and just adulting with them, and we go skiing. So
This is awesome.
Yeah. We have our picnic, which is coming up this next Sunday afternoon, Baltimore, Washington annual picnic. It's been on for 30 years. And I think I sent invitation to you guys.
You absolutely did.
I did hear back. I know it was kind of a little bit of short notice, but I'll keep you I'll get you coded in the database so you get it months in advance.
Yes.
Keep us
Yeah,
on the
definitely.
list.
Yep.
Because that's a great vehicle for new families in particular. They can come out and meet us and meet the other families and meet the kids and get a little taste of what camp's about. It calms their fears of sending their kids off with strangers to another state.
Yeah,
Often think
definitely.
about that.
Yeah.
Just give me, you don't know me, but just give me your kid. I'm going to take them to Virginia. I'll bring them back in a week and I promise you they're going to be better. It's like most parents, they're not excited.
Yeah, it was like we've already dealt with a big injury, and now you want me
Exactly.
to have them in a different state.
Yeah,
Like,
you just know the
yeah.
anxiety and fear that they have about their child. So I really feel privileged when someone actually lets me take their child to camp. How much do they have to trust us to do
Right.
that? It's an awesome responsibility, really.
I
Right.
love that you have that picnic that you kind of they can
like a
talk
meet
to
and
people who've been
greet.
before, or parents, and
Mhm.
kind of get more
Yeah.
of that peer endorsement of
Yeah.
camp, which is
And,
great.
and one more very important thing, no child is too young to refer. A lot of times people go, well, what age do kids go to camp? And I say 7. Well, I had a 5-year-old, so I didn't refer them. No, in 2 years, you won't know where they are, but there's a
Yeah.
good chance I'll know where they are.
Yeah,
So if you have an infant that your experience tells you this child's going to have issues down the road, go ahead and refer them, and we will contact the family and follow up with the family and invite them to the picnic and those kinds of things to keep in touch with them until their child is old enough to go to camp. And we have
Yes.
been talking about doing a little kids program, like a day program at the hospital.
Mhm.
And I think that's something we should talk about at some point,
yeah,
where
definitely.
you can invite these families in with these small kids and we'll provide the entertainment and you can provide some education.
Yeah.
We can provide some education, and it can be like an afternoon. I mean,
I
doesn't
like
have to
that
be
idea. Yeah.
I do too, and we have families that could definitely help with.
And I think we've all had kind of a mental block, like, about the age. Well,
Yeah.
this patient or this patient's perfect.
Yeah, they're
This is
4, but they're just
4-year-old. I
too
would
young.
never think about referring a toddler.
Yeah.
And
They're-
that's
they
Yeah.
can, they are
so, yeah, that's
never,
our population. It's
yeah,
like,
never too young and really never too old in a way. And by that, I mean, if you have a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old and they're not going to age out before the next camp, I would still refer them and let us talk to them. Because I have had 17-year-olds come to camp. They only came 1 year because they aged out, but come to camp. And then we can hook them into all of these other resources like the Phoenix Society and things like that.
Yeah, I feel like we did this mainly for our nursing staff, but I feel like we all learned stuff we didn't know by talking to you today.
Certainly.
Well, I'm
Thank
very
you.
happy.
Yeah, thank you so much for spending the time with us today and letting us introduce you to our nursing staff. And we always end our BurnCast the same way. Thomas, I'll let you go last because you haven't done
Okay.
this before. So I always ask everybody to say one thing that you want bedside nursing to know about whatever topic that we're talking about today. Like, what's your one key take home? And I'm going to go first because I don't want Ann or Liz to steal mine.
I was gonna say, because you're gonna steal mine.
Yep, I want it but I want people to know that it doesn't just have to be a burn to go to burn camp. Like if you see an injury that is going to cause like mobility problems down the road or scar problems down the road, like make sure that like you talk to the nurse practitioners or anybody from the burn team of like, hey, have you referred this child to burn camp? But no, burn camp isn't just burn camp. And go ahead.
Mine for bedside nursing is that the counselor recruitment process or application process can start early and in the fall or anytime. So just contact the burn camp and start talking to them.
Liz?
I just love how you describe the program as it's such a key step in this journey for the patients and how it's really the vehicle to a better life. I mean, that really spoke to me. And thank you for providing this for the kids and their families. Gosh.
Sure. And the one thing I want to say to bedside nurses first, when I first came to the burn center, bedside nurses were my mentors. I learned more from bedside nurses than probably anybody else about burn care. We still talk about nurses from those 1985, 1986, 1987 timeframes that were so important in our development. But I think the one thing I'd like to add in is we're always available. As I've kind of alluded to, we have a lot of connections and a lot of resources. And if a bedside nurse sees a need, they shouldn't hesitate to contact us, because we will, I would even be willing to come to the hospital and meet with a family. I mean, that's not too much to ask. I could come down, or Linda could come down and meet with them and talk about it. And I think for some of your bigger burns, your kids are going to be there long term, and the families are just struggling. One more positive thing could be good for them, and we could come in and be a really positive discussion with them about that. And having watched kids for 35 years go from coming off a helicopter to having extremely successful lives, I think I can speak to that whole continuum about, hope for the future.
Wow,
Wow.
we really appreciate that.
Yeah,
And
thank
that,
you.
I mean, all of
this
the work
is-
that you've done and saying that this is all put together by volunteers. I mean, it's so wonderful to see, and so supportive for our patients, because
And
we take
we
care of
want you
some of
guys
the
to join
medical
those
stuff,
ranks.
but yeah, it's great.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I've really, really enjoyed this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.